Welcome to JMR Talks. Today we will discuss about freebies. As we all know, a lot of discussion is going on about the desirability of extending these freebies, whether they are a boon or what we call bane to the economy. In fact, the discussion picked up the momentum when our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji referred to the referee culture or the what we call freebie culture. Maybe keeping in view some parties left and right announcing freebies to the people, maybe with a view on what we call vote bank politics or whatever it is. The topic is of such a serious concern that even it caught the attention of Chief Justice of India of Supreme Court, when what we call he said the balance has to be what we call maintained between economy losing money in terms of extending freebies, and at the same time what we call welfare of the people. Now, what do we mean by freebies as such? The dictionary meaning says that anything you give free. For instance, it could be free power, healthcare, education. That's all called what called freebies and all that. According to Election Commission, there is a subjective interpretation of this word of freebies, and there is no legal definition as such. As such it expresses what its inability to give a concise what called definition of the same thing. Now, according to Reserve Bank of India report, freebies, they don't refer to what I call a public distribution system or national employment guarantee scheme, but definitely things like free electricity, waiver of loans, all that, they tantamount to what I call freebies and such. Now, when we look at the history of freebies, how exactly what I call they started, now they have what I call assumed what I call alarming proportion. The origin of freebies could be traced to what we call in general to the south, and especially to what we call Tamil Nadu. And there's an what we call interesting story that Kamraj sir, when he was the CM of Tamil Nadu, when he was waiting at the what we call railway crossing, he saw some children herding the sheep. So he asked them that, why did you go to the school? Then one of the boy replied, if you go to the school, who will what we call give us the food? Now that gave Kamraj sir what we call an idea that government need to do something in that. That's how what we call midday meal scheme has come. But subsequently we all have seen parties in what we call Tamil Nadu in particular, and what we call other state general, left and right they are announcing different schemes of what we call freebies, like giving mixers, grinders, etc. In fact there's a say, somebody has reported that one person who was contesting from Madurai, he promised helicopters or free ride to the moon and all that. Now, what is the issue? Definitely, freebies, what call they don't come free. Definitely, they are a burden on the what call taxpayer. In fact, it could be said as if you are keeping something what call in the what call right pocket and taking from the what call left pocket as such. Now, for instance, it has been reported that the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh has distributed about 1.62 lakh crore in terms of various welfare schemes, freebies and all that. And it is also reported that government is finding it what called difficult, and as such raising loans by mortgaging some lands, what called some corporations, what called assets, etc., etc. But when we say this, we are not trying to say that freebies are not good. Several studies have established beyond doubt that, for instance, midday meal scheme, it helped in what called quenching hunger and improve the what call attendance at the schools and all that. Now, a moot question arises as to whether freebies are a boon or what call bane. Most of the economists whom I could interact with, myself being a student of economics, they are of the opinion that it all depends on the state's capacity and the ability. In other words, if the state has a surplus, is in a position to what call spare some money to finance what call freebies, excellent, good. Because after all, ours is a what call welfare state. We are committed to what call to the welfare of the what call people as such. But when you are taking care of the what call poor's welfare, there is a need to balance between what call them and the growth of economy. We have seen the neighboring country what call Sri Lanka, the kind of economic crisis what call they are going through, because the left and right what call they have went on what call announcing schemes without looking at that revenue what call deficit and all that, and today you look at what's happening. So distribution of what call freebies to some extent is fine, because it is necessary to uplift the what I call marginalized what I call sections of the society. But if you continue with that, without trying to what I call add to the productive capacity of the economy, whereby what I call gainful employment opportunities created to the what I call youth, definitely it harms the economy. Now we can look at what I call some of the what I call ratios to see whether a particular state is what I call having what I call a financial mess or not. Now the 15th Finance Commission has what I call prescribed some percentages for the fiscal deficit to gross state domestic product. For instance, for the year 2021-22, they prescribed what I call 4%. For 22-23, 3.5%, and for 23-26, what I call 3%. But the situation is so alarming that many states, what I call either almost what I call nearing the what I call these ratios or what I call cross that actually. So the second one is what I call interest payment to what I call revenue generation. Now this ratio indicates the debt servicing burden of the economy. The higher the what I call your ratio, I mean it's not good for the state as such. The third ratio we can look at is what I call revenue deficit. The lesser the deficit, what I call it's better for the state. But if the deficit is more, then the government will be forced to what I call raise debt to meet the expenditure as such. When we are talking about freebies in our country and all that, let's look at some of the developed economies in the West. If you look at some of these what I call countries, about the amount what I call spent on subsidies, it's not more than 1% of what I call GDP. For instance, if you take what I call Germany, they send only 0.9% of their GDP on subsidies. France, it is what I call 0.4%. Whereas in India, if you take agricultural subsidies itself, they constitute about 2.25% of the what I call the GDP as such. The situation is what I call so alarming. Probably, and because of this, I think Honorable Prime Minister expressed concern for this rewarding culture, and that's the reason maybe Supreme Court is what I call thinking of setting up an expert panel to come up with what I call a regulatory mechanism, and to also to see the impact of freebies on the economy, and how to differentiate what I call freebies from the welfare of the people, etc., etc. So what needs to be done? Definitely, government has to what I call create more and more what I call employment opportunities, maybe by facilitating setting up of industries, etc., etc. Any government aid for any project, be it industry or agri related thing, unless until they are going to add to the productive capacity of the economy, it will be a blow to the economy as such. In other words, government must be very wise what I call in spending their money. Now, for instance, government can think of giving merit cum means scholarships, fees relaxation, subsidized what I call loans, etc. Now these are some of the things which will help the people from the marginal sections what I call to come up. But once what I call these people come up to what I call reasonable state, or in a position to what I call take care of their kids and all that, probably we should seriously think of what I call discontinuing that facility for them as such. For instance, look at what I call Raitu Bandhu scheme of Tamil Nadu. Excellent financial investment what I call support scheme. I understand they are giving what I call about 5,000 per acre during the two seasons, Rabi and the Kharif, for about 58.33 lakh farmers. Excellent scheme. But where does lies the what I call problem? The problem is that the government has not specified what I call any ceiling as such. So there are people who hold what I call 20 acres, 30 acres. They're also what I call reaping the benefit. In other words, a discrimination has to be made between who deserves what I call who is what I call should be entitled and who is what I call not. The situation is what I call so alarming that it has forced what I call the Supreme Court to set up an expert panel. I think they are in the process of setting up an expert panel which is expected to what I call see what should be the regulatory mechanism, what constitute what freebies, what constitute welfare, how does it impact the economy and all that. According to experts, the sustainable debt to state gross domestic product ratio should not be what I call more than 20%. But somebody was mentioning the other day that Tamil Nadu it is about 21% as such. That means a major portion of what I call government revenue is what I call going to service the loan. So how will you what I call finance the capital what I call project or capital expenditure as such? In other words, the revenue expenditure and the balance what I call capital expenditure must be what I call what I call monitored on a regular basis. If a major chunk of what I call your budget is going to work towards revenue expenditure, then the economy will suffer in the long run. Now let's not forget one thing: freebies, they're not free. It is a burden on the what I call honest what I call taxpayers. But when I say this, I also say that there is a need to protect the marginalized what I call section, because ours is a welfare state. The government is what I call committed to work for the what I call welfare of the people. But a balance has to be what I call maintained between taking care of the welfare of the marginalized section and at the same time long-term economic growth of the country. And more so, keeping in view the experience of countries like what I call Sri Lanka. So what I am trying to what I call say that without foregoing the fiscal deficit or the macroeconomic stability, government is what I call welcome to do something what I call on the freebies, to improve the economic well-being of the marginalized sections. Thank you.